Hey everyone, happy October Native Plant Month. My name is Mark. I'm here with our directors at large, Jennifer Hopton-Villalobos and Cali Adams. Gia is not here with us today. I would like to add in our slides at this point for a garden chat. So we do a weekly webisode, well, every few weeks webisode, if you guys have been joining us for numerous occasions. And this one particularly is about baby native plants. So let's get started. Our cause is the conservation, preservation, and restoration of Florida native plants and native plant communities. This happens to be the mission statement of the Florida Native Plant Society. And I have the pleasure of introducing Jennifer Hopton-Villalobos. She is a Lake Helen resident, which is out in West Volusia. She's their environmental advocate out there. She's done a lot of good work restoring the water quality as well as the historical nature of native plants that were found around Lake Helen. She happens to be our invasive plant coordinator. Cali Adams is a rural Seminole preservationist. She's out in Geneva. She's a rare plant lover. Her yard is mostly scrub sandhill ecosystem, and she has a particular affinity for those plants within that community. A special thanks goes to the University of South Florida, USF. Their plant atlas is always a very helpful reference sheet for us. The University of Florida, as well as so many innumerable people out in social media on Instagram as well as Facebook. Do's and don'ts. So I'm going to pull up the ethical harvesting document that Kaylee was able to put together, and it's extremely useful. And this is part of Kaylee and Gia's, and I believe Susan Early and Kim Warner also moderate and help out. That's the main group there at Florida Native Gardening. But here is a helpful resource on ethical sourcing of native plants, whether it be roadside, land development, native plant identification, where to start, the ecological impact of your harvest, laws and regulations. So Billy's put together a very informative post that has been pinned to the very top of this group. Again, that group's name is Florida Native Gardening, in case you guys want to join it. So follow rules and common sense. As far as consumption, we do not endorse the consumption of wild plants. If you don't know what the wild plant is, or if you even have a doubt, we don't endorse you consuming it. Consult your physician. Everybody has their own allergies. Everybody there's a wide range of metabolism across people. So just consult your physician first. And embrace local plants. We strongly recommend showcasing Florida native plants local to your area. So South Florida plants have a different ecology. They have a different plant community down there. Panhandle, the same thing. Central Florida, the same thing. And even within those areas, there are pockets of local plant communities that are diverse. So that's the reason why Florida is the 6th most biodiverse state when it comes to plants. It's not uniform across the state, so celebrate and embrace local plants in your region. And join Native Plant Society. So it's simple as going to fnps.org, click on join. If you happen to be in the area that we serve, you can always select Cuplet Fern from the dropdown. There's student, individual, household, and business level memberships. And today's topic is baby native plants. We had to focus, because it's such a broad subject, we narrowed it down to native plants that are found in the Central Florida garden. So, it was a very big and broad subject, and we thought maybe refining it down would be helpful to our viewers. Couple of key points. So seedlings are close to the parent plant. So in case you're looking at saw palmetto, for example, if you don't have a saw palmetto anywhere in your neighborhood or anywhere in your immediate, I would say, 5-mile vicinity, chances are, especially if you live in a very urbanized environment, chances are you do not have a saw palmetto plant. Mature plants nearby will have seedlings nearby too. There are some exceptions to that. For example, ferns, because their spores are so lightweight, you'll find ferns spread out far and wide from the parent plant. Another example, unfortunately, is Brazilian pepper, which is distributed via birds. So you may not have a parent plant close by, and you may have Brazilian pepper just pop out of the blue. It is important for you to learn leaf shapes and texture and their position. And this is just a taste. This is from an herbarium graphic. So you have simple leaves, you have compound leaves, but research them a little bit further. It's a very diverse, botany is a very diverse science. So go ahead and research what you're looking at. You know, it can be opposite leaves, whorled leaves, palmate leaves. And when you understand leaf shape, you can understand baby native plants a little bit better, because you will see the leaves before you ever see the fruit or flower. The same thing goes with texture. So this was a great from New South Wales Botany Guide. So it shows you different types of dense covering of hair. So it's called a tomentum or tomentose. So sometimes as we age, our vision is not as acute as it was when we were younger. So sometimes touching the leaf, feeling if it's velvety or hairy, and different types of hairiness can be very helpful. And there's a huge diversity of hairs on plant appendages. Sometimes they can be spiky, so we don't want you to go ahead and touch things that may prick you. But for other reasons, it's important to touch the leaf of the plant to actually get a proper idea of what you're looking at as far as a baby native plant. So my first slide is gallardia, blanket flower. So gallardia pochella, it's found pretty much across the state. They always go back and forth whether it's native or not, but for now it's native. And the leaf position is always a triad of baby leaves. So I'm gonna pull up my pointer here, and you can see 1, 2, 3. So that's one baby native plant. That's another one. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So these are all baby native gallardias. And a seedling season is as early as summer. It is a fertile myrtle plant. So when you have one, you will have many. It's a heavy receder, and it happens to be an annual. So it's short-lived. It can be an annual or a short-lived perennial. So look for baby gallardia within the year. So once you have gallardia flowers, you should have baby gallardia very soon. And the size matters. So this is a good example, and I'll pull up the pointer again. So this is the size of baby gallardia compared to richardia, which is the Mexican clover. So they're much bigger, and their leaf count is about the same, 1, 2, 3, and then they have a new set of leaves coming out in the very center. But look at the size comparison, right? So that's another visual for you to determine whether you're looking at a frequent invasive in people's lawns like gallardia. I'm sorry, not gallardia, richardia, versus gallardia over here. And saw palmetto. So I touched on saw palmetto. It's found pretty much across the state. Here are the seeds, as you can see, or the fruit, I should say. And these are the seedlings. So they look like really small, you know, blades of grass. They're not grass. We can tell that they're not grass, but they kind of look grass-like in this stage. And just look at the leaf litter. So you can tell just by the, you know, the size of the leaf litter that the leaf blades are really small. And they're really slow to grow. It's an important wildlife plant. It is very long-lived. So some of our saw palmetto species can live up to 400 years. And the saplings are diminutive. So I found a great way to determine what you're looking at. So Here's a picture of a queen palm frond that was found in my yard. And of course, there was a queen palm that was growing nearby. But just look at the leaf litter for a size comparison. So here is a oak leaf right here, and see how big the leaf size is. Look at the oak leaf litter here, and look how small the leaf size is here. So that's another good way of size comparing the two. And of course, if you don't have saw palmetto growing nearby, chances are you don't have saw palmetto. It does get kind of distributed by larger animals, particularly bears. But if you don't live in bear country, if you live in the middle of the city, chances are you have a non-native palm or maybe a cabbage palm rather than a saw palmetto. And I believe I'm coming down to my final two. This is Scorpiontail. So I had a nice picture of a non-native shrimp plant. They're called green shrimp plant or Bleckum species. And the best way to actually notice whether you have, if you have green shrimp plant in your lawn, it looks deceivingly similar to Scorpiontail. But look at the venation or the leaf veins. So in Scorpiontail, they're very prominent, versus in green shrimp plant, they're more subdued. So again, they're opposite. And there's a term called decussate, which means that each leaf set is 90 degrees in angle from the next set of leaves. So the bottom leaves are, for example, let's just say they're north-south. Then the next set of leaves will be east-west. And then the following set of leaves will be north-south again. So that's what the meaning of decussate is, approximately 90 degrees. And here's elephant topaz. So I don't have the tall elephant's foot that many of you are aware of. They're found in scrubby flatwoods or scrub environment or sandhill environment, I'm sorry. I have the Carolianus version, which is Elephant Topaz Carolianus, Carolina elephant's foot. And it has oblong to spatulate leaves. So it kind of looks like a kitchen spatula. All right. And a good way is to differentiate if you have both growing in your yard, and if you want to know if you have Carolianus, is to feel your leaf. The leaf for the Carolianus is far less hairier than tall elephant's foot. So this is one of those baby plants that you'll probably need to feel the leaf to get a fair idea of which species you're looking at. And Kunti is the next slide. So Kunti is fairly easy. It's a cycad. It always has these fronds that pop up, and this is the initial frond. It's always in a group of 4 leaves. And they're really small, glossy. The seedling season is in the summer. They're very slow-growing cycads, pine trees. Those are very slow-growing plants. Saw palmetto. They'll really grow down into the ground first before shooting up. So they really need to establish their roots and attain sufficient nutrients before they start really growing more vertically above the ground. And beggar ticks, I couldn't leave these out. I mean, everybody has them, right? Look at the map for it. It's everywhere. So beggar ticks is easy to note. It's always got these lobe leaves, and these lobe leaves become leaflets, so they're completely separate. As they mature, of course, they're seed heads. Some people swear by them, some people swear at them. It's fertile myrtle, always frequently germinates in disturbed areas. So I just remulched an area last week, and guess what? I have a whole ton of beggar ticks coming right in. So it's good to note that the initial leaves or the seed leaves, they're called cotyledons. The cotyledons look very much like this. They just look like grass blades. But then the true leaves are lobed. So that's another easy way to show. Here's the cotyledon leaf. I'm sorry, right here. And these are the true leaves. So the seed leaves look much different from the true leaves do. And porterweed, I believe, is my last slide. So porterweed, God bless it. It's such a frequent cedar in my yard. Matter of fact, this is a picture of my yard right here, and it's intermixed into the lawn at this point. Leaves are opposite and decussate, meaning like, let's say this is north-south and this is east-west. So that's decussate. And they're serrated. So that's a very telltale sign of porterweed. And you'll always find this very frequently near the plant. So as we probably know, porterweed can be a mounding shrub, attracts many butterflies, moths, and bees. Excellent plant to have by the windowsill. But once established, it will shade out other baby native plants under it. So you'll always find seedlings for porterweed along the edge of the mound or slightly further away. I believe Kaylee, no, these are Jennifer's, right?
That's fine. All right, so I've had a lot of experimentation with growing seeds, a lot of failures, a few successes. So Liatris, those were my only 2 sprouts for an entire flat. And you can see that it has the cotyledons. I'm probably pronouncing that incorrectly. They look like small regular leaves, and then the true leaf spikes up and it's kind of like a grass. So that's the distinctive part that I noticed compared to other plants that that pop up surprisingly. Even if you get a potting mix that's fresh from the store, other things magically pop up in it. And I found them be patient when you're transplanting this one. It seems like it's sensitive to transplantation when it's young. So let it get a bit older. Sometimes you get excited to get them out in the yard, and then they just dry up, or they just don't make it. Maybe the root disturbance does it. So let it grow a bit before you plant it out in the yard. You go to the next one. And this is helmet skullcap. These reseed pretty well. Sometimes they don't seed directly below the plant. It seems like maybe the rain or the wind blows the seeds down from it a bit. And they have the little serrated edges, and you can tell the veination has like a purple color and it's dark. And this is a pretty hardy plant that will reliably come back every year, but the leaf color is beautiful all throughout the year, and then you have your flowers show, and then it starts to fade away. So so that's it says leaves have a minty odor when rubbed. So that's another way to identify it. And then Rouge Plant, that's a fertile one that will it creates it produces a lot of berries. So you'll get a bunch of babies from one plant, and it has the ruffled wavy leaf margins, and the veins are prominent on it. Also, the stems kind of have a coloration to it that's a little bit red. And this is one it's easy to pull out. So even though it might get a bit weedy, I find it easy to manage the regrowth of the leaves or the plant. Move on to the next one. And Elliots Lovegrass. This one germinates very reliably, and you can transplant it while it's very young, and it seems to survive that very well. So you'll notice when it's first sprouting that it has what looks like a stem, and it opens up into a blade. And it forms a clump of grass stems as it develops. And yeah, go to the next one. The next slide. Can you hear me?
Yes,
okay.
I can.
Go to the next slide. Oh, there it is. So that's the germination success was really prolific with it. So if you're wanting to fill in a space, maybe a fence line or something like that, this is a really great one, and they're really beautiful right now. I was able to get them to go in the ground and stay alive while they were older than this, probably more like the previous slide. But you can take those clumps once they get a little bit bigger and gently tease them apart, sit them in some water, and let the roots kind of separate on their own in the water, and get them in separate pots and let them grow out just a little bit more. And you can put them in the ground early on and they'll survive. Go to the next one. And this is Simpsons rain lily. So you can see it's a long leaf blade, but it's got a texture to it that's it's stronger and thicker than grass. And so you can plant it when it's young, but you won't really see it necessarily. You'll have trouble, deciding which thing to pull up and which not. And so it can be tricky to maintain an area while it's young, but it seems like it tolerates competition pretty well. The root is bulb-like, so it tolerates drought conditions, and it'll just magically make a flower one day, it seems like, even though it has competition. So it's a nice thing to plant in a yard with grass, because it handles the competition and it doesn't really look different from everything else. But if you want to keep it in a pot because you want to make sure that you see it when it grows, then that's a possibility also. Go on to the next one. And I'm being the invasive weed coordinator, I'm always out for these plants, and this one is a big problem in my yard, the Bengal Day Flower. And there's another kind of day flower that I'm having trouble with. It seems like there's two different varieties, but you could tell when it first pops up, the leaves are shiny, kind of succulent like. When the sun shines on them, they kind of sparkle almost, and they readily break apart on the stems. But when they're at this stage, it's really easy to just, run your hand over it or take a gardening tool and just scrape it, and they'll all go away. But once they start getting bigger, it becomes more of a pain to take care of them, because when you pull it out, the stems break, and any little piece that breaks off will readily root and grow in your garden, and they just climb all over everything, and they'll even climb up a shrub or something like that. So don't let that one take over. The flowers are pretty, but they are not cooperative.
Yeah, I agree.
And this is one that always pops up in my my seedling pots. I don't know where it's coming from. I don't know if it's in the potting mix or not, but this grass leaf spurge, you'll notice as it gets a little bit beyond the first two leaves, the cotyledons, that it has that V-shaped white coloration along the vein, and it also has that one jagged serration part going up towards the middle margin of the leaf. They seem like they aren't very invasive, but when you're trying to decide what do I pull up and what do I allow to stay in my tiny little seedling pot, this is the one you want to pull. um, and also in flower beds, they do pop up often. So when you're trying to maintain that this is the one that is gonna show up. But ultimately, for me, it's like if you're not sure, sometimes it's best to just wait until some kind of thing is identifiable, just in case. Because some plants you can't tell until they get older. I have a problem of not labeling my seeds when I plant them, and I'm just sitting there staring at them for months, waiting for something to be identifiable. And sometimes it's not until it flowers that I know. So then I'm either excited, or horribly disappointed. And this is Salvia Company, one of my favorite aggressive natives. Um, so these readily reseed everywhere, even in pots that I didn't plant them in, and I'm fine with it because they look great together, and you can just throw them in any particular bed, and they go along with everything pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see the first true leaves have the heart-shaped leaf with the serrated edges. And they also have an odor if you rub the leaves, kind of I don't know, an astringent odor. It's not incredible, but that's a good way to identify it also. They grow pretty fast, so you won't have to wait too long for them to flower. And go to the next one. Yeah, so this is a common seed mix invader for me, and it always tricks me. Sometimes I'll have a complete fail success rate for germination, and I'll think that, I'll get those first two leaves coming up and think it's, the plant that I planted. And this one time, it was all this oxalis. It was completely oxalis. I didn't get one native plant. So luckily those clovers show up pretty quickly, and then it's not your plant, it's oxalis. Were you gonna say something, Callie? Or Kaylee? Sorry.
No, I was mostly kind of like shaking my or nodding my head and commiserating on dealing with oxalis invading.
Yeah. Yeah, it can be a pain. It's more like a disappointment just because you're really excited about what you wanted, and then this shows up.
I'm glad you put that slide in.
Yeah. Go to the next one. Okay. So this looks like someone else's.
Yep, this would be mine.
Okay.
So yeah, I wanted to kind of, before I got into some plants, was kind of talk about some things to think about with the environment. Like if you're either identifying or if you're growing, seedlings from seed, either in pots or if you try to do direct sowing. or any of that. So like nursery plants I wanted to talk about is they're not necessarily the plants you would buy at the nursery. I'm thinking more of like they shelter the young plants. They give protection from the harsh wind or sun, any elements, so that they create a good microhabitat for seedlings to grow. So it stabilizes the soil and the climate for, optimizing the growth and provides nutrients and root structure. And then kind of opposite of that is allelopathic plants. They prevent the growth of plants around them, except for gap specialists, which I'll get to. But the allelopathic plants can put off chemicals in the soil through their roots, I believe, or through their shed of leaves, and it makes it inhabitable to most other plants. And then there's like gap specialists would go in and they can temporarily fill in those spaces. Like if you walk through a scrub and you're in the super sandy area, it's all open and you see one tiny little like what's a polygonella, and that's a gap specialist there. They just take up a little space and then they die and they move somewhere else in another gap. And then like life history strategies, if things are annuals, perennials, or even biennials, which I learned about, is it's kind of in between. It's not sure if it wants to be an annual or a perennial. They last about 2 years. And then like the way that plants, put out their seeds, if they put out a lot or a little bit, and then like how they do it, if it's meant to be eaten by animals or wind. Some seeds have a casing that you need to crack open or scarify. And then like germination requirements that need temperature changes. And then also some seedlings are particular and need fungus in the soil, like mycorrhiza, where you'll see mushrooms pop up. You'll usually see, if you dig down, some white stuff in the dirt, and that's the fungus that brings up nutrients for seedlings to grow also. Right,
Excellent slide. Super informative.
Thank you. I have to credit, I talked with Kara Driscoll to help me understand some concepts there, because I had pieces of things that I wanted to talk about, and then I asked her, I was like, look, help me. And she definitely helped me fill in some gaps there. The allelopathic stuff, especially with the gap specialists. So then I wanted to get into the plants, and mostly my stuff is scrub. So I've got sandhill milkweed here. The picture on the right are 2 that I grew from seed by direct sowing them in May, and that was just a few weeks after. And so they very quickly grow a deep taproot because they grow in a fire dependent habitat, so they have to adapt to that. So they grow the deep taproot to get away from fire. And because of that taproot, it makes it hard to repot seedlings or have success in regular growing pots. So you need usually really deep pots to, grow them in. And then when you transplant them, handle them with extreme care. They're very sensitive. Don't let them dry out too long. Don't let them get too wet. They're finicky. They like just their right habitat for the scrub. But direct sowing provides pretty good results also. All right.
I just wanted to add, I bought 4 of these at $10 a piece.
Ooh.
From someone who had them in the deep pot, and only 1 survived.
Oh no.
So I tried, but
Yeah.
at least I got 1.
Yeah, you get 1 out of it then.
Yeah, but that was a hard lesson.
Yeah.
How mature is it? Is it putting out seed pods at this point?
It is really tiny. I'm hoping that it's just a slow grower. I haven't experimented with these before. They grow right next to my property, so I know they grow here. Just I've had trouble with seeds before, so I wanted to get plants. I think maybe that would be the best option. So this is a tricky one to, handle with care, for real.
This particular plant is highly recommended by Dr. Jared Daniels for monarch restoration, because it's really connected with that particular butterfly. And I think he would, if he were around, we would ask him why this particular milkweed over others, but he highly recommends this one, the Humistrata.
Yeah.
The leaves are
Yeah.
beautiful.
Beautiful.
They
I
are.
love
They're
them.
just gorgeous. As they get bigger, they turn more purple, and I adore them. I don't
Yeah.
have any existing on my property, so this is me adding to it to create something new. So
For sure. I think based on your property's ecology, you have better success than we would because you have such good sandy, well-drained soil.
I sure hope it helps out.
It
So,
is. If you've got success like that, you've got the right place.
yeah, so far, so good. This picture on the right down there is actually a picture I took this morning, so that's them now. So they're, since May, and they're 2 to 3 inches or so tall, long, whatever. They're slow going, but they're good. And then on the left there is a picture in Florida Native Gardening. I submitted a post to ask members to share any photos that they had of seedlings to, share. So Laura Jordan shared this as she's growing hers in a pot. And I sure hope she had some success with that one because they're tricky in pots. But yeah, so they germinate best when they're fresh. Like if you harvest the seeds off of the flower or after it flowers. And as Craig Hugel has said in a post before, is to harvest or plant the seeds like almost right away because they lose viability the longer that they sit and wait. And with Unistrata seedlings, well, milkweeds in general, if you find a seedling, it's going to be tough to find a mother plant nearby because they have the seed drift or the wind drifted seeds. So they're pretty easy to recognize when you know what you're looking for when you see them. So the next one. And then I have sand pine trees. I have a lot of them here on my property, so I wanted to kind of showcase them because their little seedlings are cute. And I think in general, seedlings for pines kind of stay in a grassy stage, so they kind of look similar to other pines as they stay small. But the Pinus clausa stays like with the needles stay short, and when they're little baby plants, like this picture I have on the bottom there, it's they're short and stiff, and the needles are 2 needles per fascicle. Am I saying that right? Fascicle or fascicle? Okay. And they're kind of irregular up the stem. They just kind of just go crazy, a little lollipop of fluff. And you can find the seedlings basically anytime. I capitalized it there to kind of portray some frustration that I have with them being anytime. They can very easily take over in an area. They're pretty weedy, but if you get just one and you want it to grow as a specimen in an upland garden, they're very drought tolerant, but they'll need a little bit of space because can get tall if they have room. They'll get up to 70 feet if they have the space and resources to do so, but they don't tolerate root disturbance. So if you drive over it, you can kill it. So, or if you drive over the roots, not the tree, but of course you kill it if you drive over the tree. All right, so I have the next one. I took a picture of just a little stand of baby pines that have come up within, I guess maybe the last 5 years or so that they're, roughly aged. And that's a gopher tortoise hole behind it and a small live oak tree. But, once those pines start going, they take over. So if you find baby pines, you might want to get a handle on them before you get inundated with pines.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's a interesting thing about them is like I had thought that they were all fire dependent to open the cones, but I learned that there's also a kind that can just mature and make cones and produce them in 2 years, and there's many, many more sand pines again.
Apparently, this one, we have that next to us, and there's a rosemary scrub about 50 feet from the house, and it's surrounded by these. It's a big bug. Tell it's struggling now. Shade from a.
Yeah, they'll outcompete just about everything and make a very dense understory that pretty much nothing else will grow in. That's the problem I'm running into in one spot of my scrub. I have to do a chop and burn at some point.
Yeah,
This
but it
was
is a beautiful specimen tree.
it
It
is.
is very pretty, and you can decorate it to look like a Christmas tree. So if you have it in your front yard as a a specimen, and it has that nice Christmas tree shape, you can make it into a cute holiday decoration.
Yeah,
So
this tree was the original Florida Christmas tree.
yep.
My
Yeah.
grandma used to go out in the land I'm talking about, and she'd usually have to take a few of them and like tie them together or something, and that was our Christmas trees.
They're like a Charlie Brown Christmas tree. But and another interesting thing is that they're kind of intolerant to fire. So I thought that was neat, since scrubs are fire
Yeah.
cats.
I didn't
So
know that.
yeah, they're because the branches come out like ladders, and then they make a high crown fire that's too hot,
Okay.
and it's very intense. So another concern I have of having those things out there.
Ah,
But then on to a happier one is sky blue lupine, and I can't ever imagine a person who doesn't love these. I unfortunately took out the picture that I had that had flowers in it, but I wanted to show seed germination. So on Florida Native Plant Propagation Group, Gabriel Campbell posted this the other day of seeds that he scarified and soaked, and he had a decent success rate of seedlings emerge. So I like to follow his posts on propagation because he's very well knowledgeable on that. And then on the top right there, I have that's from the Florida Native Plant Society website, but you can see they're very inconspicuous looking until they get bigger, and then they have those obvious flowers. So the leaves are like palmately compound. They come out looking like fingers from the stem, and they ascend in like 3 to 5 lobes. From how I read on the website, I was comparing to a seedling that I have in my yard that's actually a little different, so we're not sure about that. And you can find them in the summer and fall, and it's another one that's difficult to grow from seed in pots. So direct sowing is pretty well recommended unless you know and have the ability to control like every environmental factor.
yeah.
You can just plant them in the sand. That's what I did. I have a few that's marked out in the dirt to say, hey, watch out for this one. But they're not tolerant to excess moisture, and they don't handle root disturbance, and they grow a deep tap root. So they're a typical scrub plant that, it's another one that's a reason why it's not common in the trade, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a very beautiful plant when it's in flower.
Yeah.
Very
They also depend on like a certain soil condition. Like you have to have the similar soil as the mother plant, like which usually is the fungal mycorrhiza. So they're persnickety.
yeah.
But lucky enough to have them, like more power to you. Just keep them going if you can.
Hmm.
Another identifier, the leaves are very soft. They're like
Yes.
kitten fur.
They can be kind of fuzzy, I believe. That's why the one that I have in my yard, I'm thinking it's a lupine. Actually, I've got the picture of it on the next slide even, because I thought it was a lupine, but now it's unsure. It could be a golden aster. So I wanted to include this also as an example of baby plants are just hard to identify sometimes, and even experts will tell you, give it some time, let it grow, let it flower, and take some pictures and see what it does then. So that's what I'm doing with this guy, is I've just got it marked, and I'm just going to keep watching it. But it's got the hairy leaves and the kind of similar shapes as the others. I'm not well versed in keying and in knowing all of the
And
technical terminology for that, so
you
I just
have a lawn that can sustain both this golden aster, which I feel that it is, or the lupin or lupine. So only time will tell.
yeah, either way I'll be happy with it. But we'll see. That's how it is sometimes.
Lucky you with the lupines. Very
Right.
hard plant to grow. Lucky you. Even if you have one, Kaylee, you should be honored and blessed.
I really, really hope this is it, but you know, it is an ever learning process. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, folks, if you do not have lupine or lupins growing in your vicinity, you don't have lupine growing naturally or, dispersed into your yard. So it's one of those things that doesn't travel too far. If memory serves me right, the dispersal method is quite explosive. So when the seed erupts or gets thrown out from the plant, it just pops off. But it's always nearby to the plant. It doesn't get transported by birds or small mammals or anything of that sort.
Mhm. That's right. They the pods just kind of pop open and see a lot of the seedlings. Like that's part of the reason they need that mother plant soil is they'll fall, kind of right there usually. So you'll see a big stand of them. I saw a picture recently as it was lady lupine, but it was up in the Apalachicola National Forest, and it was just everywhere in the understory. It was beautiful. But they'll do that. They'll spread in a small area and make a colony of them.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
So, and then the next one is Carolina Jessamine. I wanted to throw this one in there because it can be easily confused sometimes with cat's claw. They have similar leaf shape, but cat's claw leaves come out like so Carolina Jessamine's leaves are opposite, and cat's claws are not opposite. I'm not sure on the words for that one, but so cat's claw, you see those three little claws things, and Jessamine does not have that. So when they're little, it's they're tricky. So they can grow by seeds, which will usually be underneath the mother plants, or they'll grow by runners. So they'll spread and they'll make a colony, and usually where you find one, you'll find more. And they bloom early in the spring for a very short time, and then they set seed, and then they start growing. And so you can find them mostly in the summer when they're babies. And a lot of the times, if they're runners, they're already rooted and are pretty easy to dig up. I haven't actually dug up any, seedling ones and had success. So they're evergreen and they're very, very fragrant. They smell just amazing when they're in bloom. It's just short-lived, but they feed bees and butterflies and hummingbirds, all just love the flowers. So it's a good vine to have as a, on the side kind of plant. But if you could find those ones. And then I've got on the next slide, I wanted to throw in some Easter red cedar. So I know not everybody has these, but if you have somebody in your neighborhood has some red cedars nearby, the birds will eat the berries and bring them everywhere. And so you won't usually see the seedlings underneath the tree. So the needles for the baby plants are really small, and they're actually sets of 4 that are opposite, and then they alternate up the stem. I forget the word that you said earlier, Mark, for the 90
So
decuss.
90 degree. Yeah, decuss it.
They do that, but with four needles coming out decussant from each other. So I thought that was interesting. And they're very sharp when they're babies, and then as they grow older, they soften up and become more scale-like. They sprout in the spring, usually after the spring songbirds come and eat the berries when they've ripened, and spread them around. And they're very slow going. They'll stay in this little stage for a couple of years, and then they start growing, and then they become kind of a Christmas tree shape, and then they just keep going and going and going. They get big, so they need space. But they're perfect for forage for birds and habitat. Butterflies and squirrels, all kinds of animals love them. And they're allelopathic. So on the last slide I wanted to show how at the base of my big cedar tree, nothing grows there. except a beautyberry, and maybe some, I think it's torpedo grass or something that takes over in my lawn. So allelopathic plants, they create that harsh environment around them, so not really much of anything else will grow except for temporary and specialty plants that won't compete for nutrients. And they kind of work together, I guess, to create an area for each other. It's just a small little microclimate.
Mm-hmm.
And then I added this other picture of a smaller cedar. It's along the side of the road, and even at a small size, that's about 3 feet tall. And there's still not really anything growing underneath it directly. So they pretty quickly start putting off that allelopathic property. And again, like their seed dispersal is through the birds, taking it wherever the birds go and drop it. And then you have baby cedar trees usually underneath power lines or along a fence line, sometimes out in rural areas. I see them out here. And under trees, they start growing, and I think they need a shelter plant because they start growing under trees a lot. That's just my own assumption on that. But so they're allelopathic and don't behave well. So it's tricky to grow around a cedar tree, I found.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Good to know. Good to know. Oh, okay. That's actually the final set of our baby native plant slides. So just wanted to touch base. You guys, our viewers, will get native plants donated into your yard, especially if the parent plant is nearby, but you will also get invasives becoming donated into your yard as well. For example, Jennifer has the non-native Camelina Day Flower, and that was probably donated into her yard because it's probably growing in a neighbor's yard, or maybe she shared a lawnmower one day, and that's how it got donated into her yard. Another great example is green shrimp plant, which is being found in a lot of lawns these days. It's getting mixed into people's St. Augustine and Bahia, and you would say, what the heck is this? Well, it's the green shrimp plant, and it's non-native, and it is getting circulated, passed around because you have the same lawn service company, and they're not cleaning their blades in between because, of course, I mean, come on, people are, you're not paying them enough to clean their blades and sanitize it after every house that they service. So, that's how they're getting propagated, is they're getting propagated through clippings. So this is a great website for you all. It's called plaincleango.org. They have Invasive Species Week. I believe it's every February. And just go to Plain Clean Go. They're constantly updating the information on how you can stop the transport of invasive non-native plants from one location to the next. There are several different vectors, whether it be through dirty shoes or your motor, the rotor blades of your boat, or transporting firewood, stuff like that. All right. And join Native Plant Society. So that's my slide again. Please support and, through membership and donation. And if you happen to be in our region, choose Cuplet Fern from the dropdown. Does anybody have any questions at this point? I'm going to pull some up from the chat box. Permelia Ely says, thanks for the wonderful online programs you guys are producing. So happy folks can stay in the loop during this time of isolation. Love to you all, P. Thank you so much, Permelia. Appreciate that. Citrus chapter joined us, and I believe it's Athena behind the screen. And Athena is recommending Color Country Nursery in Citrus County. They have been selling baby native Asclepias humistrata every year at great prices. Citrus County is pretty cool. They do something called a nursery crawl. So they'll grab a caravan of all their members, and they'll go from one nursery to the next and do a crawl with hauling plants along the way.
I usually fill up on nursery number 1 if it's a good one.
I would have a hard time practicing self-control with that, but I would be totally down to do that.
Yeah, yeah. I'm tempted. I just don't know. I need to work with what I have. Penny says thank you. Elizabeth says thank you for the wonderful pictures. You're welcome, Elizabeth. Oh, there's Athena. Hi, Athena. She says, do you prefer starting seeds in seedling mix? Do you find some seeds need to be started in native soil? That's a great question.
I use potting mix. I find that if you use native soil in a pot, it doesn't allow the soil to dry out quickly, and I think it doesn't have enough oxygen in the soil, so kind of tricky, especially when you're working with a dryland plant. You want the soil to dry out quickly, so you need something that has more aeration to it. So even adding some perlite into a potting mix helps with the aeration issues.
Yeah, that's what I do is I use compost from my yard. So it might have some native sand mix in because the compost, but I'll do compost or potting mix and add perlite, lots of perlite.
Mm-hmm. That was a good question. Thank you, Athena. I tend to use native soil, and I'm a bit of a pragmatic guy because if I put them in trays and if I give baby them and all that, I'm really neglecting the rest of my yard. So I just plant them in a particular spot and label it and say, hey, this is where my coreopsis went. And if I get baby natives there, I'm like, okay, these are the ones to keep. I do recommend Jennifer and Kaylee's method of using perlite and organic, garden potting soil, your standard potting soil. That's a really good way to ensure that the seedlings are getting nutrients easily accessible to them. But
Another thing sorry, I thought you were done.
Go ahead.
Another reason I use potting mix is because when I did try to use native soil in the seed flats, I was getting a lot of volunteers.
Yeah.
Nurturing things I didn't want.
Yep, you're activating the seed bank within that native soil. Another good way, and maybe you guys want to consider it, is doing a third. So you use a third garden potting soil, a third play sand, like straight up, like if you got sandbags for this hurricane season, you can use that sand too. So a third sand and a third pine bark fine, shredded pine bark, and mix it all together, and that's your starting mix. So that's almost like a poor man's starting base. But the perlite and the organic potting soil, those are things that are preferred, of course. Michael Duffy asks, hey, Michael, he's from Tarflower Chapter. Michael is asking, what is the name of the app? It's called Play Clean Go, playcleango.org. You can pull it up on your tablet, your phone, your computer. Best national-based resource for limiting the transport of non-native invasive plants. Darlene Merrill writes, very informative. Thank you. Thank you, Darlene. Folks, if you have any other questions, now is your chance before we wrap things up. Kaylee, Jennifer, any parting words for our viewers at this point?
Just that fall is a good time to start seeds for native plants, and go ahead and get out and try some plants. Whether you feel like you're going to have success or not, just at least try.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Fall's the time to do it. Most native plants, this is their seed time. If you want to give it a try, but don't give up if you fail, because sometimes you just got to try different things.
Mm-hmm.
Use the online community for resources for their experience. That helps too. So reach out to people.
Yeah, it's a broad subject. We just gave you the gist of it, a taste of baby native plants. There's so many out there that are used in the Central Florida garden. And, I always recommend feeling the leaves, just the texture of the leaves will give you a better idea of what the baby native plant is. And Citrus County writes, the I Got One is another good invasive app to report plants. Yes, so in case you have an invasive plant problem, emerging invasive plants, they're very keen on letting them know. That app is run by, it's actually a collaboration between the University of Georgia and the University of Florida. But in case you want to report a bad invasive plant problem or an area, that's a good app to use. But Plain Clean Go is, they'll just give you tips on, brushing your shoes after you leave a wild natural area, or cleaning your rotor blades off your boat before you transport it into the next water body, or stuff like that. So it's a more graphic and flyer and resources on simple tips that just anybody that is exploring out there in the wild can use. All right, folks, so that actually wraps things up, and we will see you next time. Our next webisode for Garden Chat is on native plant communities. So in case you guys are living beachside, or you have a scrub habitat, or a sandhill habitat, or a flatwood habitat, we'll be talking about plants that are found in those groupings, so you can garden and take advantage of those naturally found plant groupings that we call native plant communities, and that you can get inspired by. So we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us.